Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. And today we're going to be looking into something truly disturbing. It's the Hello Kitty murder case that happened in Hong Kong back in 1999.
Yeah, it's a pretty horrific case. And we've got a few sources here to sort of guide us through. We've got a really detailed Wikipedia entry and then a couple of articles online. Some are a bit more detailed than others. Some offer a slightly different perspective. But all in all, it paints a pretty awful picture.
Yeah. And our mission for you today is really just to kind of extract the key facts, the core elements of this crime, without getting, I think, bogged down by the sheer volume of information that's out there.
Yeah, definitely.
So it's spring 1999 in Hong Kong. And just picture for a second a seemingly normal kidnapping case that is about to unravel into this nightmare of torture and dismemberment and a final resting place for a young woman that's just bizarre, to say the least. So the victim in this case, Fan Man-yee, she was only 23 years old at the time of her death. She was actually born in Shenzhen in 1976. And she had a really tough start in life. Abandoned as a child, grew up in an orphanage.
Yeah. She, kind of faced those really difficult realities growing up, and she ended up struggling with homelessness and drug addiction. And eventually this kind of led to her into prostitution.
Yeah.
And in 1996, she got married to a man called Nung Chi-wen. He was also a drug addict, and they had a son together in November of 98.
And life in their apartment in Mongkok was far from easy. Neighbors would report, these frequent arguments between the couple, lots of shouting and yelling, and, the sound of their child crying. It must have been really awful.
Yeah.
But it seems like Fan Man-yee was really trying to turn things around,
Yeah, absolutely. Driven by a powerful desire to kind of create a better future for her son, she took these steps to try and really turn her life around. Quit drugs, quit prostitution, and found work as a hostess at a place called the Empress Karaoke Club. But tragically, she'd also left her abusive husband shortly before her murder, probably because of the, financial strain that came with all these changes.
Yeah, it's just such a tragedy all around. So let's look at the main people involved in this horrific crime. The first one is Chan Man-lok, also known as Alok or Asi. He was 33 years old at the time, and he was a member of the Woshing-Wo Triad Society. So for listeners who aren't familiar with triads, they're basically organized crime syndicates in Hong Kong, and their involvement can sometimes make, disputes and things escalate pretty quickly.
Yeah, for sure.
And Chan had a history of drug trafficking, convictions dating back to 1991. And it seems like he was actually a client of Fan's when she was still working as a prostitute.
Right. And then we've got Long Huailun, also known as Gangsta One, if you can believe it, who's only 21 years old. And before all this went down, he was working in a retail store near Granville Road. And there was also Lum Xingzhou, who they called Gangsta Two. We think he was around 26. He was actually dating Lau Mingfang. And guess what? He was working at the same retail store.
Whole world.
Yeah.
And then there's Lau Mingfang, also known as Ah Fong. Now, she was only 14 years old. And the sources actually kind of differ on her relationship with Chan. One of them suggests that she was someone he was grooming. Another says she was his girlfriend.
Wow.
It's you kind of wonder about the power dynamics, especially considering her age. So let's rewind a bit to early 1999. It seems that Fan actually stole Chan's wallet, and inside the wallet was around 4,000 Hong Kong dollars, which is about 500 US dollars. Now, as you can imagine, Chan was not too happy about this. He demanded not only the stolen money back, but he also wanted an extra 10,000 Hong Kong dollars on top of that. It's hard to say if it was like, compensation or punishment, but, it was a pretty hefty fine, so to speak. And Fan, she returned the original 4,000 Hong Kong dollars, but she needed more time to come up with the extra 10,000. And it seems like this is the kind of the trigger for what happened next. So on March 17th, 1999, Fan was abducted from her apartment in Layu Estate. And the people who took her, it was Chan, Lau, Lung Weilun, and Lung Xingzhou.
Right.
And they took her to this apartment at 31 Granville Road in Sim Sha Tsui. Now, this apartment was rented by Chan, but it was actually owned by two people who had no connection to, any kind of gang activity or anything like that.
Okay.
And initially, it seems like Chan's plan wasn't the horrific, outcome that actually happened.
Yeah. It seems like his plan was to actually force Fan back into prostitution and use her earnings to pay off, what she supposedly owed him. But things escalated pretty quickly, and it turned into something so much worse.
Yeah. And for about a month, Fan was held captive in that Granville Road apartment. And what she went through during that time, I mean, it's just sickening.
Yeah. It's really hard to even fathom. But, the reports paint this picture of just, constant, brutal torture and, repeated rapes as well.
Yeah. Awful.
One report talks about how she was beaten with metal bars. Sometimes. This was when she was suspended. And she was kicked in the head apparently around 50 times by Chan. And what's even more chilling is that the 14-year-old girl, Lau, she joined in this assault.
Yeah, it's unbelievable.
And as if that wasn't bad enough, they would, they would rub spices into her wounds, and they burned her legs and feet with candle wax and molten plastic. And these injuries were so severe that she eventually couldn't walk. It's just mind-boggling how cruel they were.
And there are these really distorting reports that say that they forced her to smile and actually say that she enjoyed the beatings. Mm-hmm. And if she refused, then the torture would just get even worse.
It's awful.
And one source actually mentions that they forced her to eat human feces. I mean, it's beyond comprehension.
It really is.
And all this abuse led to, her death from traumatic shock sometime between April 14th and 16th, 1999. And then when they discovered that she was dead, they went to these really disturbing lengths to try and hide what they had done.
Right. I mean, it's almost as if they, had gone so far that they had to just keep going further into this awful, awful situation.
Yeah.
So they dismembered her body in the apartment bathtub, and then they boiled her remains. They were trying to, stop the smell of decomposition, of course. And it's at this point that we come to the detail that's really given this case its notoriety. Her skull was sewn inside a Hello Kitty mermaid doll.
A Hello Kitty mermaid doll.
Yeah. And it was filled with dead insects. I know, it's beyond belief.
Yeah.
And they took the rest of her body and just dumped it in different garbage dumps around Hong Kong. Sham Shui Po, Wan Chai, Tai Kok Tsui.
So they just kind of scattered the remains?
Yeah, pretty much. And what's so strange is that this innocent image of Hello Kitty, it's now forever linked with this horrific crime. It's really unsettling.
Yeah. And tragically, the only remains that were ever recovered were her skull, a single tooth, and some internal organs.
Right.
And those were found on May 24th when Lau actually led the police to the scene.
Right. The first officers on the scene were from the Yau Ma Tai Police Division. And then, of course, the investigation started and the arrests followed. Chan was arrested at his apartment in Shek Lei Estate. He lived there with his wife, Apui, and their newborn baby. They actually had a SWAT team raid the apartment, and the wife was initially a suspect, but she was quickly released, after they determined that she wasn't involved.
Yeah.
Can you imagine what she must have gone through, finding out all this about her husband?
I can't even imagine.
And Lun Wai Lun, he found out about the case through the media, and he immediately took off for mainland China. He went to Guangxi province. But he was eventually caught in February 2000 because there were some problems with his passport.
Uh-huh.
He was actually on Interpol's most wanted list, so they brought him back to Hong Kong to face trial. Mm-hmm. And Fan's skull, which was a crucial piece of evidence, was formally identified on June 3rd using this thing called a photo overlapping method. Yeah. They basically compared photos of the skull to photos of Fan to see if they matched.
Wow.
Yeah. And then the trial started in October 2000. And the testimony from Alema, it must have been chilling to hear.
I bet.
Yeah, she was given immunity in exchange for her testimony. And she just described in detail, all the horrific things that they did to Fana. And what's really disturbing is that she even admitted to joining in on the beating, saying she did it for fun. I mean, talk about a lack of empathy, right?
It's just awful.
Yeah. And despite all this, Chen and Lu Xingshou, they both denied killing Fan. They did admit to dismembering her body, though.
So they were trying to kind of separate the act of killing from what they did afterwards.
Yeah, exactly.
But the jury, which was 8 men and 1 woman, they came back with a verdict of manslaughter. It was a split decision, though, 6-3 on December 7, 2000.
Right.
And the reason they gave for this verdict was that, the remains that they had weren't enough to definitively prove that Fan had been murdered as opposed to, dying from a drug overdose.
Yeah, which is just unbelievable to me.
I know, it's hard to wrap your head around that.
Yeah.
But it really does show, the challenges of proving intent in a court of law, even when the actions are just so clearly horrific.
Yeah, for sure.
But the court did determine that, Fan's death was a direct result of the abuse that she suffered at their hands.
Right.
Even if they couldn't completely prove that they intended to kill her. The judge, Justice Peter Nguyen, he described the crime as just unparalleled in its in its cruelty, depravity, callousness, brutality, violence, viciousness. It's like every bad word you can think of, he used to describe it.
Wow.
And the psychiatric reports, they said that all three of them were remorseless, so they were all sentenced to life imprisonment. But they were told that they could be eligible for parole after 20 years.
Okay.
Though Lung Xing-cho, his sentence was later reduced to 18 years on appeal back in March 2004.
Oh, wow.
And Chan and Loon Wai-lin, they're still in Stanley Prison serving their life sentences. And it's a reminder that even when these legal proceedings are over, the consequences of this kind of violence, they linger.
Absolutely.
And Lung Xing-cho, he was actually released from prison in April 2014, but he was jailed again in August 2022 for sexually assaulting a child.
Oh, gosh.
So yeah, it's a reminder of the lasting impact these people can have on society. And the Hello Kitty murder, it was a huge media sensation. And, it's still something that people talk about today. It's so disturbing.
Yeah. And after the trial, Fan's skull was kept by the forensic pathologist, until all the appeals had been dealt with. And in March 2004, it was returned to her birth family, and they were finally able to cremate her remains.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And that apartment building on Granville Road where it all happened, it was actually demolished in September 2012. And in 2016, they built a hotel on the site called the Soravit. And they actually put 3 Buddha portraits in the hotel as a kind of memorial.
Oh, it's almost like they're trying to, cleanse the area.
Yeah, I mean.
And there's one little detail that I found really heartbreaking. During the investigation, they found a necklace that belonged to Fan in the apartment refrigerator.
Oh, wow.
And they gave it to his son. It's like this one little connection he has left to his mother.
That's really sad.
Yeah, it is. And the Hello Kitty murder, it was so brutal and so strange that it was actually turned into 2 films. Human Pork Chop and There Is a Secret in My Soup. They were both released in 2001, just a couple of years after the crime. It just goes to show you how much this case, captured the public's imagination, or I guess their horror.
Yeah, for sure.
So today we've delved into the tragic story of Fan Man-yee. She was a young woman who really faced a lot of adversity in her life, but she was trying to create a better future for her son.
Oh.
And we looked at the brutal kidnapping, the torture, the discovery of her remains, and the trial that led to those manslaughter convictions.
Yeah.
It's a case that just stays with you. It's just so shocking and disturbing.
It really is. And it forces us to think about, the potential for human cruelty and how something like this can happen.
Yeah.
And I think it also makes us think about, how does the legal system handle cases like this, where it's so hard to prove intent? And what does a manslaughter verdict, in the face of such horrific acts, what does that really say about our understanding of justice?
It's a lot to think about.
It is.
Well, that's it for our deep dive today. Thank you all for listening. We know it was a tough one. And as you go about your day, think about these questions. Think about what this case says about human nature. And we'll see you next time.